She was 10 minutes from becoming Mrs. Carter when the man who had driven her family for 12 years looked her in the eyes and said 3 words that stopped her heart. "Get in, now." The wedding dress that cost more than most people's cars suddenly felt like a costume, and the morning that was supposed to be perfect shattered before the first hymn even played. What she heard next would expose a lie so deep it would destroy not just a marriage, but an entire legacy built on trust. I'm going to tell you exactly what happened that morning in Charlotte, North Carolina, when a bride named Sarah Mitchell chose to trust a warning that sounded insane, and how that single choice saved her from becoming someone's carefully planned disaster. This is her story. Every word of it is true. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you are new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Sarah Mitchell wasn't someone who took risks. At 29, she had built a life that made sense on paper. She worked as a financial analyst at a downtown firm, owned a modest condo in Dilworth, and had maintained the same close circle of friends since college. Her parents, David and Laura Mitchell, had raised her to be cautious, thoughtful, and deliberate. Her father had spent 30 years as a federal prosecutor, and her mother ran a nonprofit that helped women escape domestic violence. Sarah grew up watching her parents navigate a world where people lied professionally, and she learned early that trust was something you earned slowly. So when she met Marcus Carter at a charity gala 2 years earlier, she didn't fall fast. Marcus was charming, sure. He had the kind of smile that photographers loved and a way of making you feel like the only person in a crowded room. He worked in commercial real estate development, drove a sleek Audi, and spoke about his future with the kind of confidence that didn't feel arrogant, just assured. But Sarah made him wait. She watched how he treated waiters, how he spoke about his mother, how he reacted when plans changed unexpectedly. And over 18 months of dating, Marcus passed every test she could think of. He was patient when she needed space, attentive when she needed support, and respectful when she set boundaries. Her parents liked him, her friends approved, even her younger brother, who hated everyone Sarah dated, admitted Marcus seemed solid. The proposal happened on a quiet Saturday morning at Freedom Park. No flash mob, no public spectacle, just Marcus on one knee by the lake with a ring that wasn't ostentatious, but clearly chosen with care. Sarah said yes because it felt right. Not rushed, not desperate, just right. They set a wedding date 8 months out, long enough to plan properly, but not so long that momentum would fade. Everything moved smoothly. The venue was booked, the caterer confirmed, the invitations sent. Sarah's mother kept saying how proud she was that Sarah had found someone who matched her values, someone steady and real. But there was one person who never seemed fully convinced, and that was Raymond Hayes. Raymond had been the Mitchell family's driver for 12 years. He wasn't just an employee. He was family in the way that people become family when they show up consistently, quietly, and without agenda. Raymond had driven Sarah to her high school graduation, to her college move-in day, to the hospital when her grandmother died. He was in his early 60s, a retired police officer who had taken the driving job because he liked the Mitchells and didn't want to spend his retirement doing nothing. He was observant in a way that came from decades of reading people in high-pressure situations, and he rarely spoke unless he had something worth saying. From the beginning, Raymond watched Marcus differently than everyone else did. He never said anything critical out loud, but Sarah noticed the way Raymond's eyes would narrow slightly when Marcus spoke about his business deals, or the way Raymond would pause before responding when Marcus asked him casual questions about the family schedule. Once, about 6 months into the engagement, Sarah asked Raymond directly if something was bothering him. They were alone in the car, heading back from a dress fitting, and the question had been building in her chest for weeks. Raymond was quiet for a long moment before he answered. "Miss Sarah," he said carefully, "I've spent a lot of years watching people lie. I'm not saying your fiancé is lying. I'm just saying I don't know what his truth is yet." Sarah felt a chill run through her, but she pushed it aside. Raymond was protective, she told herself. He was doing what he always did, looking out for her. It didn't mean Marcus was hiding anything. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a blur of final details and mounting stress. Sarah barely had time to eat, let alone think deeply about anything beyond seating charts and vendor confirmations. Marcus seemed equally busy with work, often staying late at the office or taking calls at odd hours. He apologized for not being more present, blamed a major project that was closing right before the wedding, and promised things would calm down once they were married. Sarah believed him because she wanted to believe him, and because nothing in his behavior seemed overtly wrong. He was still affectionate, still made time for dinners when he could, still talked about their honeymoon in Greece with genuine excitement. But then, 3 days before the wedding, something shifted. Sarah was at Marcus's apartment, staying over because it was easier than going back to her place after a long day of wedding prep. She woke up around 2 in the morning to use the bathroom and noticed Marcus's phone lighting up on the nightstand. She wasn't the type to snoop, had never felt the need to, but the frequency of the notifications felt strange. 3 messages in under a minute, all from a contact saved only as J. She hesitated, her heart beating faster than it should, then told herself she was being paranoid. She went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. The next morning, Marcus was already gone when she woke up. He left a note saying he had an early meeting and would see her later at the rehearsal dinner. Sarah tried to shake off the unease from the night before, but it clung to her like humidity. She spent the day running errands with her mother, picking up the final flower order, confirming the photographer's arrival time, checking in with the venue coordinator. Her mother was glowing with happiness, talking about how beautiful the ceremony was going to be, how proud she was of the woman Sarah had become. Sarah smiled and nodded, but part of her felt distant, like she was watching the day happen from behind glass. The rehearsal dinner that night was held at an upscale restaurant in Uptown. About 40 people attended, close family and the wedding party, everyone in high spirits and full of toasts. Marcus's best man, a college friend named Tyler, gave a speech that was funny and heartfelt, talking about how Marcus had always been the guy everyone could count on. Sarah's maid of honor, her best friend since freshman year named Emily, gave a speech that made Sarah cry, talking about how she had never seen Sarah happier than she was with Marcus. Marcus himself gave a short toast, thanking everyone for coming and saying how lucky he felt to be marrying someone as incredible as Sarah. He looked at her when he said it, his eyes warm and steady, and Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She was being silly, she told herself. Everything was fine. If this story has your heart racing, comment, "I'm still watching." Let's see who's truly here till the end. But as the night wore on, Sarah noticed something that bothered her. Marcus kept stepping outside to take calls, 3 times in the span of 2 hours. Each time he came back looking slightly tense, his smile a little forced. When Sarah asked if everything was okay, he waved it off, said it was just work stress that would be resolved soon. She wanted to press further, but didn't want to seem paranoid in front of everyone. Raymond was there that night, having driven Sarah's parents to the restaurant, and Sarah caught him watching Marcus during one of those phone calls. Their eyes met across the room, and Raymond's expression was unreadable, but Sarah felt that same chill from months earlier settle over her. The night ended late, and Sarah went home to her parents' house where she was staying until the wedding. Tradition dictated that she and Marcus spend the night before the wedding apart, and honestly, Sarah was grateful for the space. She needed one more night to just breathe, to let the enormity of what was about to happen settle over her. She fell asleep around midnight, exhausted but still unable to fully relax. The wedding was scheduled for 2 in the afternoon. Sarah woke up at 7, feeling a strange mix of excitement and dread that she assumed was normal pre-wedding jitters. Her mother and Emily were already downstairs making breakfast, and the makeup artist was due to arrive at 9. Everything was moving according to plan. Sarah showered, put on comfortable clothes, and tried to eat even though her stomach felt tight. The morning passed in a flurry of activity, hair being styled, makeup being applied, her mother fussing over every detail with tears in her eyes. The wedding dress hung on the back of the closet door, ivory silk with delicate lace sleeves, and every time Sarah looked at it, she felt her chest tighten. Around 11, Raymond arrived to take her father to the church early. Her father had some last-minute coordination to handle with the officiant, and he wanted to make sure everything was set up perfectly. Raymond came inside briefly, and Sarah was surprised when he asked to speak with her alone for a moment. Emily and her mother exchanged glances, but stepped out of the room, assuming Raymond wanted to give Sarah some kind of fatherly advice. Raymond closed the door behind them and turned to face her, his expression more serious than she had ever seen it. "Miss Sarah," he said quietly, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I wouldn't be saying this if I wasn't absolutely certain." Sarah's heart started to race. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Raymond took a breath, and when he spoke, his words were measured and deliberate. "Your fiancé is not who he says he is. I've been watching him for months, and I've seen things that don't add up. The phone calls, the places he goes when he says he's at work, the people he meets with. I hired a private investigator 4 weeks ago because I needed to be sure before I said anything to you." Sarah felt the room tilt. "What are you talking about?" she managed to say, her voice shaking. Raymond reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. "Everything is in here," he said. "Bank records, photographs, phone logs. Marcus Carter is involved in something illegal, something tied to money laundering through his real estate deals. But that's not the worst part." He paused, and Sarah saw something in his eyes that looked like grief. "He's been in contact with someone who has been asking questions about your father's cases, specifically about sealed federal investigations. I think Marcus got close to you to gain access to your father's work." Sarah's legs went weak, and she sat down hard on the edge of the bed. "No," she whispered. "No, that's not possible. You're wrong." Raymond knelt down in front of her, his voice gentle but firm. "I wish I was wrong," he said, "but I'm not. And if you walk down that aisle today, you're going to marry someone who is using you and your family for his own agenda. I can't let that happen." Sarah's mind was spinning, trying to process what he was saying, trying to reconcile the Marcus she knew with the man Raymond was describing. "Why are you telling me this now?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Why not yesterday? Why not a week ago?" Raymond's face tightened with regret. "Because I wanted to be absolutely certain," he said. "I didn't want to ruin your wedding based on suspicion alone. The investigator only delivered the final report last night. I drove straight here this morning because you needed to know before you made a decision you can't undo." Sarah stared at the envelope in his hands like it was a bomb. "I don't believe you," she said, but even as the words left her mouth, she felt the doubt creeping in. All those late-night phone calls, the evasiveness about his work, the way he had asked her casual questions about her father's schedule and cases, details she had dismissed as normal curiosity now felt different, tainted. Raymond placed the envelope on the bed beside her. "You don't have to believe me right now," he said quietly, "but you need to see the evidence before you make your choice. I'm not asking you to cancel the wedding, I'm asking you to look at the truth first." Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up the envelope. It was thick, heavy with papers and photographs. She opened it slowly, and the first thing she saw was a photograph of Marcus standing outside a building downtown, talking to a man she didn't recognize. The timestamp showed it was taken 2 weeks ago on a Thursday afternoon, when Marcus had told her he was in meetings all day. She flipped through more photos. Marcus at a coffee shop with a different man, this one older and wearing an expensive suit. Marcus at a parking garage, handing over what looked like a briefcase. Marcus on his phone, his expression tense and urgent. Then came the bank records, showing large cash deposits into an account under Marcus's name that didn't match his stated income, transfers to offshore accounts, payments to a legal firm that specialized in defending white-collar criminals. And then, buried in the middle of the stack, was a printed email exchange between Marcus and someone identified only as RG. The emails were coded but clear enough in their intent. They discussed access points and leverage and timeline before the wedding. One email, sent just 5 days ago, read, "Once we're married, I'll have direct access to the prosecutor's files. That's when we move." Sarah's vision blurred with tears. She felt like she was falling, like the floor had disappeared beneath her. "This can't be real," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. Raymond stood up, giving her space but staying close. "I'm sorry," he said, and she could hear the weight of those words. I know this is the last thing you wanted to hear today, but you're strong enough to handle the truth, even when it hurts. You've always been strong enough. Sarah sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes, staring at the evidence of her fiancé's betrayal. Her mind raced through every conversation they'd ever had, every moment she had trusted him, every time he had looked her in the eyes and lied. She thought about her father, a man who had dedicated his life to justice, who would be devastated to learn that someone had infiltrated their family for criminal gain. She thought about her mother, who had already been through so much pain in her work helping women escape dangerous situations, and who would blame herself for not seeing the signs. And she thought about herself, about the future she had imagined with Marcus, about the children she had dreamed of having, about the life that was now revealed to be nothing but a carefully constructed illusion. Finally, she looked up at Raymond, tears streaming down her face. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Everyone is already at the church. My dress is on. The flowers are arranged. How do I stop this without destroying everything?" Raymond's expression softened. "You're not the one destroying anything," he said firmly. "Marcus did that the moment he decided to lie to you. All you're doing is refusing to build your life on that lie. As for how we do this, that's up to you. We can go to the church and you can confront him publicly, or we can call your father right now and let him handle it privately. But either way, you cannot marry this man. You know that, don't you?" Sarah wiped her face with shaking hands. She knew Raymond was right, knew it in the deepest part of herself, but the weight of what she was about to do felt crushing. Canceling a wedding an hour before it was supposed to start wasn't just a logistical nightmare, it was a public humiliation, a family crisis, a moment that would define her life. But marrying Marcus, knowing what she now knew, would be worse. It would be a betrayal of herself, of her values, of everything her parents had taught her. She took a deep breath and made her decision. "I need to tell my parents first," she said, her voice steadier now. "They need to hear this from me before anyone else." Raymond nodded. "I'll get your father on the phone," he said. "He's already at the church, but he can step out." Sarah stood up, still wearing her robe, her wedding dress hanging untouched behind her. She felt like she was moving through water, everything slow and surreal. Raymond made the call, and within seconds her father's voice came through the speaker, warm and unsuspecting. "Raymond, is everything all right? Did Sarah forget something?" Sarah took the phone from Raymond, her hands trembling. "Dad," she said, and her voice cracked immediately. "I need you to come home, right now. Don't ask questions, just come home." There was a pause, and then her father's tone shifted, all business and urgency. "I'm on my way. Is your mother with you?" Sarah nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Yes, she's downstairs. Hurry, Dad, please." She handed the phone back to Raymond and sat down again, feeling like her legs couldn't hold her anymore. Her mother and Emily came back into the room a few minutes later, confused by the tension they could feel radiating through the house. "Sweetie, what's going on?" her mother asked, concern etched across her face. "You need to finish getting ready. We're running out of time." Sarah looked at her mother, at the woman who had spent decades helping other women escape dangerous situations, and who would blame herself for not seeing the signs. And she thought about herself, about the future she had imagined with Marcus, about the children she had dreamed of having, about the life that was now revealed to be nothing but a carefully constructed illusion. "Mom," she said quietly, "the wedding isn't happening. Marcus has been lying to us about everything." Her mother's face went pale. Emily gasped and sat down hard on the nearest chair. "What do you mean?" her mother asked, her voice tight. Sarah gestured to the envelope on the bed. "Raymond hired a private investigator. Marcus has been using me to get access to Dad's work. He's involved in criminal activity and he was planning to use our marriage as cover." Her mother's hand flew to her mouth, and for a moment she looked like she might collapse. Then her training kicked in, the years of crisis management and survivor support, and she straightened her spine. "Show me," she said, her voice steadier despite the shock. Sarah handed her the envelope and her mother read through it quickly, her expression hardening with each page. Emily looked between them, tears already forming in her eyes. "Oh my God, Sarah," she whispered. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Sarah shook her head. "It's not your fault," she said. "It's not anyone's fault except his." Her mother finished reading and set the envelope down with deliberate care, her hands shaking. "Your father needs to see this immediately," she said, "and we need to contact the authorities. If Marcus is involved in what this evidence suggests, he's a threat not just to our family but to active federal cases." Within 15 minutes, Sarah's father burst through the front door, still wearing his suit from the church. He took one look at Sarah's face and knew something catastrophic had happened. "What is it?" he asked, his prosecutor voice already emerging. Sarah couldn't speak, so her mother handed him the envelope. He read through it in silence, his jaw tightening with each page, his breathing becoming more controlled and deliberate. When he finished, he looked at Raymond with an expression Sarah had never seen before, something between gratitude and fury. "How long have you known?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Raymond met his gaze without flinching. "I've had suspicions for months, sir, but I only received concrete evidence last night. I came here as soon as I could verify everything with the investigator." Sarah's father nodded slowly, then turned to his daughter. His eyes were filled with pain, but his voice was gentle. "Sarah, I am so proud of you for listening to Raymond. I know how hard this is, but you just saved yourself from something that would have destroyed you." He pulled her into a tight hug, and Sarah finally let herself cry fully, sobbing into her father's shoulder like she was a child again. After a long moment, her father pulled back and wiped her tears with his thumbs. "We need to handle this carefully," he said, shifting into tactical mode. "The wedding guests are already gathering at the church. Marcus is there, expecting you to walk down the aisle in less than an hour. We have two options. We can quietly cancel and deal with the fallout privately, or we can let Marcus show up and have law enforcement waiting for him. Given the evidence here, I'm inclined to do the latter, but this is your decision, Sarah. It's your day, even if it's not going the way any of us planned." Sarah wiped her face and took a shaky breath. She thought about Marcus standing at the altar, smiling like he had won, like he had successfully manipulated an entire family into trusting him. She thought about all the other women he might do this to, all the other families he might hurt if he was allowed to just walk away. "I want him to face consequences," she said, her voice stronger than she expected. "Not just for what he did to me, but for everything. If you can have law enforcement there, I want that. But I don't want to go to the church. I can't see him right now." Her father nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You don't have to," he said. "Your mother and I will handle the guests. Raymond can stay here with you." He pulled out his phone and made several calls in rapid succession, speaking in the clipped, efficient tone he used when coordinating with federal agents. Sarah watched him work, feeling a strange sense of calm settling over her. The decision was made. There was no going back now. Within 20 minutes, a plan was in place. Federal agents who had been working with her father on related cases would be at the church, waiting for Marcus. They would let the ceremony proceed just long enough to ensure Marcus was locked into his position, and then they would move in quietly, arresting him for fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. The guests would be shocked, but they would understand once the situation was explained. Sarah's mother went upstairs to change out of her dress, and Emily sat beside Sarah on the bed, holding her hand. "How are you really doing?" Emily asked softly. Sarah let out a long breath. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me feels numb, like this isn't really happening. Part of me feels relieved that I found out before it was too late, and part of me just feels stupid for not seeing it sooner." Emily squeezed her hand. "You're not stupid," she said firmly. "He was a liar, and a good one. He fooled all of us, but you had the strength to listen when someone tried to warn you, and that's what matters. A lot of people wouldn't have done that." Raymond appeared in the doorway, his expression softer than before. "Miss Sarah," he said quietly, "I need you to know that I didn't take any pleasure in bringing you this information. I've watched you grow up, and seeing you hurt like this is one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. But I would do it again, every time, because you deserve better than a life built on lies." Sarah stood up and crossed the room, wrapping her arms around Raymond in a hug that surprised them both. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved my life today. I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. Thank you for caring enough to dig deeper when no one else did." An hour later, Sarah sat in her parents' living room, still in her robe, while her phone buzzed non-stop with messages from confused guests. Her father had made an announcement at the church, stating simply that the wedding was canceled due to circumstances beyond anyone's control, and that more information would be provided soon. Marcus had apparently looked confused, then panicked, and had tried to leave the church quickly. That's when the federal agents approached him, calmly but firmly escorting him out, while cameras from curious guests captured the whole thing. The footage would probably be online within hours, but Sarah couldn't bring herself to care. Let people talk. Let them speculate. The truth would come out eventually, and when it did, she would be vindicated. Her mother returned from the church an hour later, looking exhausted but relieved. "It's done," she said, sitting down beside Sarah. "Marcus was taken into custody without incident. Your father is coordinating with the U.S. Attorney's Office to make sure the charges stick." Apparently, the evidence Raymond's investigator gathered corroborates several ongoing investigations they've had into Marcus's business dealings. He's facing serious time if convicted. Sarah absorbed this information, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. "Did he say anything?" she asked. "Did he try to deny it?" Her mother shook her head. "He tried to play it off at first, acted like there was some mistake, but once the agents showed him what they had, he went quiet. He's smarter than we thought, knows when to stop talking. His lawyer will probably advise him to take a plea deal, given the amount of evidence against him." Sarah nodded, then asked the question that had been haunting her since Raymond first showed her the envelope. "Mom, did he ever love me at all, or was it all just part of the plan?" Her mother's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know, sweetheart," she said, honestly. "Maybe there was some part of him that cared about you in his own broken way. But even if there was, it doesn't excuse what he did. Love doesn't manipulate. Love doesn't use people. Whatever Marcus felt for you, it wasn't love in any form that matters." Sarah leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, feeling the weight of the day finally catching up with her. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, but also strangely grateful. Grateful for Raymond's vigilance, for her parents' support, for Emily's unwavering friendship, for the fact that she had been given a chance to escape before it was too late. In the weeks that followed, the full extent of Marcus's crimes came to light. He had been involved in a complex money laundering scheme that used real estate transactions to clean money for several criminal organizations. He had specifically targeted Sarah because her father's position as a federal prosecutor gave him access to sensitive case files and sealed investigations. The plan had been to marry Sarah, gain her father's trust completely, and then slowly extract information that could help Marcus's criminal associates avoid prosecution or identify witnesses who needed to be silenced. It was calculated, cruel, and far worse than Sarah had initially imagined. The media coverage was intense for a while. Local news stations ran stories about the canceled wedding and the subsequent arrest, framing it as a cautionary tale about deception and the importance of thorough background checks. Sarah declined all interview requests, choosing instead to process everything privately with the support of her family and a therapist her mother recommended. The therapy helped, giving her a space to work through the betrayal without judgment, to understand that being fooled by a skilled manipulator didn't make her weak or stupid, it just made her human. 6 months after the day that should have been her wedding, Sarah stood in her parents' backyard during a small family gathering. It was a beautiful autumn afternoon, the leaves turning gold and red, the air crisp and clean. Raymond was there, manning the grill with her father, the two of them laughing about something Sarah couldn't hear. Her mother was inside with Emily, preparing side dishes and chatting like old times. Sarah held a glass of wine and looked around at the people who had stood by her through one of the worst experiences of her life, and she felt something she hadn't expected to feel. She felt lucky. Not lucky that Marcus had deceived her, but lucky that she had people who loved her enough to tell her hard truths. Lucky that Raymond had cared enough to investigate when his instincts told him something was wrong. Lucky that she had parents who prioritized her well-being over social appearances. Lucky that she had escaped before legal marriage made the entanglement even more complicated, and lucky that she had learned, painfully but clearly, that trusting her instincts and the people who truly knew her was more important than maintaining a perfect image. Marcus eventually took a plea deal and was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The prosecutors used the evidence Raymond's investigator had gathered, along with additional testimony from cooperating witnesses, to build a case that left Marcus with no viable defense. Sarah didn't attend the sentencing hearing, didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing her face one more time, but her father went and reported back that Marcus had looked smaller somehow, diminished without the charm and confidence he used to wear like armor. A year after everything fell apart, Sarah started dating again, cautiously and with much more awareness of red flags than she'd had before. She took things slowly, refused to ignore her gut when something felt off, and kept her circle of trusted advisors, including Raymond, closely involved in her life. She never forgot the lesson of that wedding day, that sometimes the people who love you see things you can't see yourself, and that listening to them, even when it's terrifying, can be the difference between a life of truth and a life built on lies. And every year on what would have been her anniversary, Sarah sent Raymond a thank you card. Not because she enjoyed remembering that day, but because she wanted him to know that his courage to speak up, even when it meant potentially hurting her, had given her the chance to build a real future instead of a false one. That was worth more than any wedding could have ever been. If you were Sarah, would you have gotten in that trunk? Would you have trusted Raymond's warning? Or would you have walked down the aisle hoping everything was fine? And if you've ever ignored a warning from someone who loved you, how did that turn out? Share your thoughts in the comments below, because these stories matter, not just for entertainment, but because they remind us that truth, no matter how painful, is always better than a beautiful lie.